Water is liquid gold in the Southwest. It's used for drinking, manufacturing, power generation, wildlife, and recreation. Water can be plentiful depending on where you live, but remember, only 1% of all the water on planet Earth is available for drinking. Most of us take water for granted. By simply turning on the tap, clean, high-quality water comes out. But what if you turned on your tap and no water came out? There are three main challenges to providing a safe, reliable, and sustainable water supply for the citizens of Flagstaff. First is the high cost of new infrastructure to bring water to your tap. For example, drilling and constructing deep water wells and connecting them to our distribution system costs upwards of $3 to $5 million each. The second challenge is the high cost of replacing old and aging water and sewer lines. Historically, Flagstaff citizens haven't had to bear much of the early costs of building water and wastewater treatment infrastructure since they were subsidized heavily by the federal government. Today, nearly 30% of the city's water and sewer lines are over 60 years old, with some approaching 100 years, and it's time to begin replacing these buried pipelines that our grandparents installed. The third challenge is planning for our future. Numerous studies have indicated that the city is approaching the maximum rate we can pump from our well fields to ensure long-term sustainability without causing undesirable environmental impacts. Do you know where Flagstaff's water comes from today? Flagstaff has been developing water supplies for over 100 years from a variety of sources that include surface water, groundwater, and more recently, from reclaimed or recycled water. Flagstaff's first water supply was from springs located on the flanks of Mars Hill, now known as Old Town Springs. However, this source was too limited to support the growing timber and railroad town back in the 1880s. In 1898, work crews started to lay a 12-mile clay pipeline from springs high up within the inner basin of the San Francisco Peaks. When completed, this pipe would bring pure spring water from 10,000 feet down to our burgeoning town. This represents Flagstaff's first of three major water importation projects that would be constructed over the following 70 years. Because the Arizona Lumber and Timber Company needed more water, President T.A. Reardon constructed a dam southeast of the city in what was then known as Clark Valley. Lower Lake Mary Dam was completed in 1905 and named after Reardon's oldest daughter, Mary. The location of this dam was not ideal due to the area's geology, and it could not adequately hold water due to sinkholes within the underlying limestone rocks. In 1941, the city of Flagstaff constructed what is now Upper Lake Mary Dam and a 6-mile-long pipeline to its first water treatment plant located southwest of town. The dam was raised 10 feet to its current height in 1951 and holds nearly 16,300 acre-feet of water. 1 acre-foot is enough water for 4 to 5 typical Flagstaff households for 1 year, or roughly a football field covered in water 1 foot deep. This project represents Flagstaff's second major water importation project, 40 years after water from the inner basin was first transported to town. During the drought of the 1950s, both of these surface water supplies began to dry up, and Flagstaff realized it needed a more secure water supply to sustain its growing economy.
What this building is we have the well itself is about 10 feet out to my left, and this building houses the pumps and the electronics associated with bringing the water over 1,200 feet out of the ground and then boosting it and lifting it into the city.
Along with the wells drilled in the Woody Mountain area, a 5-mile pipeline was also constructed to bring this reliable groundwater supply to the growing city.
This area is adjacent to Woody Mountain, which is an extension of the Oak Creek Fault that creates Oak Creek Canyon. And so the geologists back in that time figured that the best place to look for groundwater was associated with the faults.
The Woody Mountain well field represents the city's first development of a groundwater supply and its third major water pipeline importation project. Groundwater became more important to this mountain community over the next 50 years as the city continued to drill deep water wells in the Lake Mary area and more recently within the city's incorporated limits. Groundwater in and around Flagstaff and the Coconino Plateau in general exists in deep aquifers known as the Coconino or C and the Red Wall or R aquifer. These aquifers exist in great depths, with some of the city's wells reaching over 2,700 feet below land surface. Not only are these wells expensive to drill, often costing more than $1 million, but lifting the water out of the ground nearly 1,500 feet requires a lot of electrical energy. Since the early 1980s, the city began an extensive water conservation campaign that has been so successful that water use per person, measured as gallons per capita per day, or GPCD, has declined from a high of 186 to 114 in 2009. This has been accomplished through a huge public education campaign and many different conservation-related programs, including financial incentives to customers to convert to low water-using devices for the home, instituting daily watering restrictions, as well as the aggressive use of reclaimed water for irrigating local golf courses, city parks, and school grounds. Reclaimed or recycled water, as it's also known, is treated at the city's 2 water reclamation plants to a quality that is approved by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for irrigation, manufacturing, construction, and groundwater recharge. Today, reclaimed water has become a significant part of the city's overall water supply and makes up 20% of the total volume water delivered to our customers. Reclaimed water also provides an important environmental benefit as well. The city's unused, reclaimed, or recycled water is discharged into the normally dry Rio de Flag, which provides a valuable water supply that supports critical riparian areas such as those found within Picture Canyon, east of town. Lastly, reclaimed or recycled water has an important water management benefit too. Due to the Flagstaff area's geology, the water discharged into the Rio de Flag percolates underground, which ultimately recharges or augments our local groundwater supplies and is actually stored for future use. Reclaimed water, along with natural stormwater, is partially filtered through the underlying rocks and then joins with the natural groundwater located over 1,000 feet below the surface. One phrase that's often associated with the infrastructure required to bring water to Flagstaff citizens is pipelines of the past and pipelines of the future. As mentioned earlier, pipeline infrastructure has been an integral part of supplying water to our community over the past 100 years. One important aspect of our water distribution system is that this entire infrastructure is buried and out of sight, so most citizens never think about the pipes that convey water to their home until a line breaks. Given that Flagstaff was founded in 1882, we have some really old water and sewer lines beneath our streets, some of which are past their prime and need to be replaced. Providing for a financially stable and viable utility is imperative in order to operate and maintain these water transmission lines, wells, pumps, and storage tanks that make up our water and sewer system. Our citizens have grown accustomed to safe and reliable services over the past 120 years, and today should be no different. To accomplish this, the city has established a 10-year financial plan for the utilities division that identifies the capital and operational costs needed to continue to provide these high-quality services. However, given the high costs associated with either adding new infrastructure or replacing old, aging infrastructure, occasional adjustments to the city's water and sewer rates is not only necessary, it's prudent stewardship of the community's money and expectations. Water from these pipelines are then stored in one of 7 water storage tanks spread around the city that can hold over 22 million gallons of water. Or put another way, there's enough water storage capacity for 3 average days of use by our entire community. The volume of water stored in these tanks is not only important to keep our kitchen taps flowing, it plays a critical role in providing sufficient water to our fire department in the event of a major fire. Now let's visit the facilities that produce and treat our water supplies. The Lake Mary Water Treatment Plant was originally built in 1941 and then expanded in 1964 to its current capacity of treating 6 million gallons of lake water every day. The state-of-the-art treatment process that's been upgraded over the past several decades ensures that all water provided to our citizens meets or exceeds federal and state drinking water standards. Not only is Upper Lake Mary a renewable water supply, but it's also one of our cheapest. Utilities Director Randy Pallets explains how water from Lake Mary makes it into our homes.
Well, when the water leaves Lake Mary, it comes down to the lower Lake Mary pump station. Then it comes into town through about 6 miles of pipeline. It gets here, we input alum into the water, which is a chemical coagulant. It takes and precipitates out the clay particles that are in the water, and it doesn't really need a lot of treatment because the watershed at Lake Mary is so pure that we don't have to do a lot of treatment to it to make really good water.
On a typical hot summer day in June or July, the city uses about 13 million gallons per day, or what we call peak day water demand. Conversely, on a typical cold winter day, the city uses about 7 million gallons of water per day. The Lake Mary Water Treatment Plant can provide nearly half of the city's water needs during the summertime, assuming there's water in the lake.
The capacity of this plant is 8 million gallons a day. When we have water in the lake, a number of years we don't have water in the lake, and so we have to run this plant at a lot less capacity than that's available. We have to run sometimes, we don't run it at all. We just save the water for emergencies if there's very little water in the lake.
Brad Hill is standing outside the newest well at Fort Tuthill.
Now we're at one of our most recent wells. This one is known as the Fort Tuthill well, which is the largest producing well the city has ever drilled and completed.
For perspective, the average of all wells within Flagstaff's water system pumps 410 gallons per minute.
We drilled this well down to over 2,500 feet deep, and we were fortunate enough to find some very large faults and fractures at that depth.
While groundwater provides a more drought-resistant water supply for Flagstaff, pumping more water out of the aquifer than is naturally or artificial replenished can lead to significant problems. One of the impacts of mining groundwater is a decrease in groundwater levels with time. In fact, some of our wells in the lower Lake Mary area have experienced decline upwards of 10 feet per year over the last couple of decades. The result of these water level declines not only requires the city to use more electrical energy to lift groundwater out of the well, but may also have a negative long-term impact on the natural groundwater system. Therefore, as we look to the future and the water resource and infrastructure challenges ahead, a financially viable utility that thinks about these issues strategically in the long term while keeping costs down today is crucial to the economic viability of our community. Now that we've described the history and the challenges of how Flagstaff developed its water supplies over the past 130 years, let's consider where we're headed over the next 100 years by looking into the future. While it might be hard for some to imagine Flagstaff could actually double in size in the future, it's important to put growth in perspective. Think of what our early railroad and timber settlers would have thought if you told them that their small mountain community of 1,500 in 1882 was going to increase over 43 times in population to Flagstaff as we know it today. To ensure that there's a sufficient and sustainable water supply into the future, it's critical for the city to conduct in-depth water resource management and infrastructure planning. Think of these planning efforts taking place like a three-legged stool. Locally, utilities uses many different types of information to better understand and plan for its water future. On a local level, the city's hydrologist works with experts from the U.S. Geological Survey and Northern Arizona University to gain a better knowledge of our region's water supplies. Internally, the city conducts master planning efforts, which help to integrate and define long-term water resource needs, necessary infrastructure to treat and deliver that water into our future. These projections are based upon historical growth rates and identifying undeveloped lands and the proposed use contained within the voter-approved regional plan. This regional plan, along with its policies, helps to provide a blueprint for how the city will develop into the future. Regionally, the city's engaged with many partners and stakeholders looking at long-term water solutions for the entire Coconino Plateau. These partners include Coconino County, several environmental organizations including the Nature Conservancy, Arizona Game and Fish, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Navajo Nation and Hopi Tribe, and the State Department of Water Resources and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. Collectively, these stakeholders have identified that our region of northern Arizona will have a shortage of water supplies within the next 40 to 50 years and are collectively working towards long-term solutions that will meet the needs of not only Flagstaff and our surrounding communities, but the tribes and our natural environment. On a statewide basis, the city is engaged in many activities and meetings with the Department of Water Resources, Salt River Project, and Central Arizona Project, where decisions are being made that affect statewide water policy and how best to manage our region's water supplies. The second leg of the stool consists of managing the water supplies the city already has under its control. One significant component is the continued water conservation. While not always thought of as a water supply in the traditional sense, increased conservation measures can delay the development of costly infrastructure as well as future acquisitions of water supplies. Another important water management tool is the adoption of a set of water policies that will be designed to preserve the public's trust in our water system through compliance with state and federal water quality and water management laws, guide strategic long-term planning, and demonstrate leadership in the stewardship of this limited natural resource while emphasizing the importance of water conservation and maintaining a level of redundancy in our water supply. The third leg of the stool is to provide a vision of the future to determine how will the city of Flagstaff provide water for the next 100 years. At a minimum, there will be two primary aspects to augmenting the city's water supplies into the future. First will be the increased utilization of reclaimed or recycled water, and second will be the importation of long-term water supply either from the Red Gap Ranch or possibly the Colorado River, while only experiencing water level declines of less than 1 foot per year over the next 100 years. Hopefully this video helped to explain the challenges of providing a safe and reliable water supply for the citizens of Flagstaff over the last 130 years. Whether it's the high cost of providing new infrastructure or replacing old and aging miles of pipeline that were installed generations ago, we all recognize the importance of planning for the future and developing ways on how the city can ensure the sustainability of its water supplies. Water's life, and its reliability is behind the economic engine that maintains the high-quality way of life of our mountain town. Whether our future water supply comes from Red Gap Ranch, the Colorado River, additional water conservation, or a combination of these alternatives, it's important to be responsible today to ensure that our children and our grandchildren will have the same quality of life that we and those before us have enjoyed. If you're interested in knowing more about Flagstaff's water supply, contact the Utilities Division, either via the web or at Downtown City Hall.